Hey guys, thanks so much for tuning in to The Suited Car Guy. Woo! Today we're going to be talking about how you can tell if a car is going to be good before it hits the dealership, and if you should put down your hard-earned money and sign on the dotted line to give them a deposit. First off, you want to check out some of the reviews that are coming out from the automotive magazines. Ideally, so what you're going to want to start by looking at is the acceleration capabilities of the car. Hopefully the car has been reviewed by a few magazines by the time that you're considering it, and you're able to look at a few numbers. Now, a lot of the times, launch control is the thing that most people make a big fuss about. But some of the launch control systems are so complicated to use that you barely ever use them. So first off, make sure that launch control system is easy to activate. Next, a very important thing is the 5 mile an hour to 60 mile an hour acceleration test. This gives a good idea of how the car's overall performance is without having to preload the engine by revving it. And it gives a great idea of how much power there is, along with the responsiveness of the transmission. Is it quick to downshift from rolling at 5 miles an hour and accelerate and give good power to the car? Next, a passing test. Now, most magazines quote things like the 30 to 50 mile an hour, or the 50 to 70 mile an hour, or the 45 to 65 mile an hour. Ideally, you want to see that these are under 2.5 seconds, or for some of the real performance-oriented cars, that they're under 2 seconds. So this will give you a good idea if the transmission downshifts quickly, and if the engine is able to apply power efficiently, and that the car is able to maintain traction while doing all those things. Next, pay careful attention to what the reviewers say about the suspension. You could start by looking at the numbers, things like the skid pad rating. Ideally, you want to be over 0.9, and the figure 8 time. Ideally, you want it to be under 25 seconds, if at all possible. Other things, when you're looking at a car that's performing on the track, you want to hear the reviewers say that they're able to maintain the set steering angle, and when you see the in-cabin footage of the video, that they're not sawing at the wheel left and right, and that they're able to maintain stability of the car in a very easy manner. Other key things to look for is the suspension setup. Is it air suspension? Is it coilover? Is it magnetorheological dampening? So the last two are really the things that I found that really give a great performance kind of oriented car. Sometimes you'll have a great air suspension, but you really have to see a lot of evidence of that beforehand. Some things like the Mercedes E63S recently came out with some great numbers, as well as the Porsche Panamera Turbo. So those cars specifically, but be very careful with the air suspension, because typically it's set up to be more of a cushy, less performance-oriented ride. Another crucial aspect to pay attention to is the brakes on the car. When they're test driving that car, are they talking about experiencing a lot of fade, or are they talking about the pedal is difficult to modulate? Recently, some cars have also come out with a brake-by-wire type of system that gives very little feedback, or is very difficult to modulate in most driving situations. Meaning that when you're trying to come to a complete stop smoothly, it's really jerking you and juddering you, and me personally, that's not the kind of ride that I want in a car. Another key thing to look for is an electronic limited slip differential or an electronic torque vectoring differential. One of the things that you typically wouldn't want in a performance-oriented car is brake-based torque vectoring. Now, it may sound good, like they're braking the inside wheel in order to give you better traction, but keep in mind that braking is slowing the car down, and additionally, it is wearing out your brake pads and your brake rotors, so you're going to need more frequent service. So try to avoid that system if at all possible. The next thing you want to look at is the transmission. The transmission is the thing that's really going to stand in the way, hopefully not, but most of the time, between you getting power from the engine to the road. So make sure that when you're listening to the reviewer, that they're saying that the transmission, one, is really good in the automatic mode, the sport mode, or the race mode, meaning that it responds very quickly to requests for acceleration and is intelligent about the downshifts and doesn't upset the balance of the car. Or you want to listen that the reviewer is telling you that the paddles on the steering wheel are very reactive to requests for downshifts and upshifts. Great cars have very intelligent gearboxes, and will give you the shift instantaneously or in a very quick fashion right when you ask for it. Less than optimal performance models will typically wait a little bit before they give you that upshift or downshift, and that can be very frustrating when you're trying to drive the car in an entertaining manner and be a little bit more sporting about the driving experience. Now, this is one of the nuances that a lot of people often forget when evaluating a car for if it'll be fun. When you get in the car, ideally you want it to be set up to drive in a sporting manner without having to fiddle with it too much, or at least making sure that it's easy for you to get into the right settings. Meaning that you don't have to hold the traction control button down for 20 seconds before it'll turn off, or that you're even able to turn it off altogether. So make sure that the driving process is easy for you to get into the car and push a few buttons and make sure that it's set up in the way that will allow you to drive in the fashion that will be fun and enjoyable. Now, a lot of people put a little bit too much emphasis on what the track times are. While track times are very important, realize that those kind of numbers and those kind of performances from the cars are not going to be typical driving situations that you and I might experience, unless they're on some kind of shorter track. Sometimes if the car's on a shorter track, it'll give you more of a better idea of how the car will actually handle performance in a day-to-day manner, because it's going at slower speeds and it's coming out of corners in a lower gear, which gives you a much better idea of how the car will actually perform in your day-to-day kind of roads, if you're not on the Autobahn or you're not fueling at hundreds of miles an hour on the highways. So keep that in mind. Race times are important, but ideally you want to see that the car is resistant to brake fade, has a suspension that can handle the turns that the race driver is throwing at it, and additionally that it's giving good transmission shifts, as well as giving responsive acceleration when the driver is coming out of corners. Now that will help you to get a good idea as if the car is going to be fun when you push that gas pedal down. Another thing that's not as important, but still adds to the overall driving experience, is the exhaust. Is that exhaust a little bit more quiet or a little bit more loud? Understand it, know what your preferences are, and ideally it should give a good balance between when you're driving slowly, it'll be a little bit more quiet, but when you are going a little bit more spiritedly, it will give you a little bit more volume to give a better overall experience and give a good feeling that you're working the car and having a good time. And that the car is responding to your requests for throttle. And give a good idea that the car is responding to your request for power. And give a good idea that the car is responding to your requests for power. Next, pay careful attention to what they say about this. Now, we have got an absolutely epic car that's going to be coming to the channel very soon, so please be on the lookout. This is a car that's producing over 500 horsepower, that's been widely talked about as leading the category for both performance and comfort blended together. So I'm going to be happy to present this to you guys very soon, so please be on the lookout. Thank you for subscribing, for liking, and for watching. Really appreciate it, guys, and have an awesome day.